NarratedNovels, Chapter 579, Tactics and Strategy Part 1. Nothing works, Freya said. None of the items Orion had prepared for her could project its energy outwards. Under the seal of the hexagram, only inner energies like fusion magic could be used. She wasn't worried about dying. The enchanted armor she wore still worked and it would prevent the fall from being lethal. Yet without magic, they had no way to stop the four criminals. I know. Protector's voice was peaceful. He took a deep breath and the world stopped moving. He was the first one to disappear, quickly followed by his two companions. What the heck? They blinked away. Jaren couldn't believe his own eyes. Stop spouting bullshit. They are still inside the array. Had they attempted any spell, we would have felt it and countered it in a jiffy. Pelion could still sense Lith's group presence thanks to the enhanced mana perception the hexagram provided to all four of them, yet he couldn't pinpoint them. At least not until one of Protector's horns rammed at him with the force of a freight train. After almost being killed by a single move of the two Emperor beasts, this time Pelion had come to the fight prepared. The moment Banyo had spotted the incoming enemies, he had activated his armor's pseudo-core to boost its defensive abilities at the expense of duration. The enchanted protection his master had forge-mastered for him was now 5 times stronger than usual. Such a powerful effect came at a price, though. It would take less than 2 minutes for the pseudo-core to exhaust its mana, and when that happened, his armor would be no different from normal clothes for hours. Fights were supposed to not last for long and Pelion would return home as soon as they were done with the third eye ritual. It was a perfect plan, at least on paper. Despite the armor's boosted effect, despite earth fusion making Pelion's body as durable and heavy as stone, he was sent flying out of the formation. All of his precautions had prevented him from being skewered by the horn, but he still took a lot of damage. His sternum cracked along with several ribs, making him spit a mouthful of blood as he fought to regain control over his own flight spell. Silverwing's hexagram disappeared, making it possible for Lith's group to use magic again. Lith and Freya jumped off Protector's back as he disappeared again. Where did he go? Aelia didn't panic and kept her focus on her ritual. She could feel the energy accumulated in the air closing to its critical mass. He did another invisible blink, Jaren said while turning his head in every direction, hoping to spot the Emperor Beast's exit point. It's you who blinked, not me. Protector struck Jaren with one of his horns, sending the Awakened flying and following up with a Tier 4 spell, Shadow Edge. A darkness-infused airblade cut deeply into Jaren's defenses and sapped his strength. There's just the two of us left. Banyo had several spells at the ready, but had no idea which one to use without exposing herself or her companions to the Emperor Beast's impossible attacks. Lith darted toward her, well aware of her eyes blazing with mana. They are all using life vision. Dimensional magic is useless. I can only employ fusion magic to move faster, he thought. Freya stayed behind, casting one spell after the other. A mage knight's role was to support and protect their companions. She would join the fight the moment the others required her help, not a second sooner. How the heck can these guys use Silverwing's hexagram? Even by combining their strength, it's supposed to be impossible. Speaking of impossible, how does Ryman warp space without opening a dimensional door? She wondered. The answer was pretty simple. He wasn't blinking, just flying with his wings. Ryman was so fast that from such a close distance not even the Awakened's enhanced senses could follow his movements. Now that he could use air magic again to support his wings, he had become even faster. In an aerial fight, anyone could fly, yet those born with wings had superior speed and maneuverability. Seeing that Jaren and Pelion had yet to recover, Banyo clapped her hands and activated the Tier 4 spell Chasing Lightning. Several golden magic circles appeared around her and from each circle erupted a bolt of lightning which resembled a snake in both motions and appearance. The lightning bolts moved toward Lith in a zigzag pattern, slower than normal, but they were still very fast. Thanks to air fusion in his flight spell, Lith managed to dodge all of them, yet his efforts bought him less than a second of advantage. Being true to their name, the thunderbolts turned around and chased after him. Yet even a split second was more than enough for Lith. He took the gatekeeper out of his pocket dimension, infusing both himself and the sword with all elements. Banyo could only unsheath her own blade, an S-stock, and use fusion magic too. None of the opposing teams could use Tier 5 magic. The slightest mistake at handling spells with such a big area of effect would hurt their companions. Banyo froze in place when she saw how fast Lith's blade moved. I can't dodge, I have to block it. She lunged at the gatekeeper's tip, to use it as a leverage point to deflect the much heavier blade with her own. Unfortunately, even though fusion magic boosted both of them, it made the gap in their physical abilities even wider. To make matters worse, the gatekeeper's ability to channel the elements made it faster, heavier, and sharper than most enchanted blades could be. When the two weapons clashed, Banyo almost lost the grip on her rapier and remained defenseless from her waist to her chin. Lith's slash blasted away her guard and opened a diagonal cut from her left shoulder to her left hip. Chasing Lightning was almost upon him. He had no time to follow up with another attack. Thanks for falling into my trap, you moron. Aelia and Banyo had a smug grin as the world energy that they had painstakingly accumulated up to that point was released. Aelia used Blink on her two missing teammates to bring them back at the epicenter of Third Eye. The three arrays forming the magical formation became visible to the naked eye. The awakened ones used their own mana to channel the gathered mass of world energy through the magical focus points scattered along Xantia. The magic circles encompassed the entire city up to its tall walls, creating so much light that they would have been visible for kilometers if not for the ongoing storm. We managed to split the damage among 5, yet it's just a partial victory. Activating the third eye during a moment of quiet means that there will be a lot of witnesses. Once we are done with those 3, Xantia has to disappear. Alia thought. Wiping out a whole city was dangerous, but doing otherwise implied an even greater risk. Lady Tiras was bound to know about Kieran's trespassing in Xantia, and if anyone recognized the use of forbidden magic, she would interrogate Diraniel. At that point, their lives would end and all of their efforts be squandered. A snowstorm wiping out a city was uncommon but not unthinkable of in the north. Supreme Magus, web novel, Chapter 580, Tactics and Strategy Part 2. The residual energy the awakened ones had planted inside the victims of the Griever formed several dots in the sky that stabilized the arrays. Lith could feel his entire body going on fire as the cracks present on his life force were about to be burst open once again. Yet the dots were too few to sustain any of the 3 arrays, which collapsed on themselves due to their inability to store so much world energy. That's actually my line. Lith unleashed the Tier 5 spell Raging Sun he had kept at the ready for that precise moment. A burst of violet flames engulfed the space around him with the strength and the heat of a volcanic eruption. Freya and Protector were safe from the spell, whereas all of Lith's enemies were close enough to be caught in its area of effect. I love it when a plan comes together. Lith was smiling inside and outside. Before going to the church, Lith had mobilized the city guards and the conscripted healers. Their role had been to forcefully heal the victims of the Griever, eliminating the focus points that the arrays required to function properly. While he kept the awakened ones occupied, the healers had dismantled Third Eye in his stead. Well, at least Plan C succeeded. Maybe third time really is the charm, Solus said. The enemies were still all alive, so she continued to focus in case the worst happened. Crazy bastard, he really pulled it off. Freya activated Full Guard and Dimensional Ruler. Her body was now surrounded by 2 auras, one blue and the other golden. She had already consumed a top-tier potion, making herself immune to spirit magic. The other 2 spells were meant to take away most of the advantages an awakened had against a fake mage. Freya had heard many times from her parents about Nalir's abilities, so she knew what to expect. Even with Raging Sun as the opening act, she didn't like their odds. They were still 3 against 4, and no matter how fast he was, Protector couldn't deal with 2 enemies at a time. Yet she didn't hesitate and joined the fray the moment the purple flames dissipated. Blood Desert, Pania Tribe, Tassar Quintus home, now. Tassar was thinking about how to punish his foolish heir and what gift he could give Lady Tiras to apologize for Diraniel's trespassing inside her territories when the answer presented itself to him. A delicate feminine figure walked out of a dimensional fissure right in front of him. Lady Tiras, to what do I owe this honor? His voice sounded like someone had put his genitals in a vice. For a second, Tassar's body couldn't decide whether to be aroused or terrified from the apparition. Tiras's human appearance had a delicate oval face and perfect features. She was 1.76 meters, 5 feet 9 inches, tall and wore the uniform of a royal constable that fit her like a glove, emphasizing her figure. Her shining golden hair was braided into a waist-long tress. There was no trace of her usual kindness within her silver eyes, so Tassar's common sense made him settle for terror. Do you really think I'm that stupid? Tiras' voice was calm, yet the mana it carried made Tassar fall to his knees and bleed from his eyes and ears. Your son and his friend trespass and a mysterious disease appears right in the city they were in. I could have overlooked their blatant violation of my laws if it was just a prank. Yet now it turns out that you sent him to practice forbidden magic on my turf. A wave of her hand made all of the arrays protecting Tassar's home collapse. The artifacts he wore turned into dust, even his prized blood scimitar. I swear I don't know what you were talking about, he said as his bones started to break one after the other in a symphony of snaps and agony. You don't know? Then it's even worse. You were so stupid that you didn't even question Diraniel properly. Do you at least know what punishment awaits those who practice forbidden magic? Her delicate hand lifted Tassar by his head, threatening to squash it like grape. Death. Who is responsible for a disciple's faults? Tiras's voice was unable to hide her anger anymore. Her question was accompanied by a roar of thunder. Their master. But Diraniel wasn't alone, Kieran. I've already dealt with Lysalia. Unlike her, you were unaware of your disciple's plan, so I'll grant you a peaceful death. Her reply was the last nail in the coffin of Tassar's hopes. At least spare my children. He wept. All but Diraniel, she nodded. I'll leave them all of your riches and enough books to study magic, if that's what they want. Yet your legacy is mine. Tiras placed her hand above Tassar's chest and stopped his heart. She waited for his mana core to disappear before moving on the second to last item on her to-do list. Diraniel wasn't going to be as lucky as his father. Her only regret was to have wasted too much time with Lysalia. Thanks to the surveillance device she had enchanted Kieran's clothes with, the assassin knew all along what the 6 youngsters were doing. She simply didn't care. To Lysalia, everything and everyone was just a means to an end. She never cared about the council, nor the guardians. Tiras had taken her time to show Lysalia how wrong she had been. Xantia's sky, now. The few seconds the forbidden formation lasted was enough for Zadros the Wyvern to recognize its nature. I knew it that following Faluel's disciple was a good move. With this recording, I can blackmail those pathetic humans and their masters to give me everything I want. It only takes a call to the council to kill them if they refuse. A wide grin appeared on his scaly face. Where is that wormling, though? How can a measly yellow-cored human be so powerful? I smell human treachery here. Zadros wasn't aware of Orion's ring shielding both Lith and Solus, but he knew of the existence of such items. The more the fight progressed, the more he was certain that Lith was using a cloaking device. Meanwhile, several hundreds of meters below the Wyvern, the battle was still ongoing. To come out unscathed from Lith's raging sun, the four awakened had to sacrifice something. Pelian's armor was as good as dead and he had consumed all the barriers he had at the ready. Aelia had sacrificed most of her spells and mana to carve a path for herself out of that blazing inferno. Jaren and Banyo had managed to blink away in time, just to discover that Ryman was able to hit both of them almost at the same time. Curse their magical protections. With just my body I can't kill them with one hit. I need a weapon. Protector thought. With Tier 5 magic sealed by the proximity of his allies and dimensional magic sealed by life vision, Ryman's options were limited. Keeping two awakened busy by himself was the only way he had to give his companions the opportunity to take out their opponents. Otherwise, the enemy would exploit their superior numbers to buy themselves time and use invigoration when necessary. Chapter 581. Tactics and Strategy Part 3. Ryman assumed a hybrid form over 2 meters tall, which resembled a two-legged humanoid wolf with feathered wings on his back. He was wearing Lith's prototype of skinwalker armor and wielding an enchanted two-handed mace. It was another failed attempt at reproducing the Gatekeeper, but it had to do. Protector had never learned how to use weapons. He had dedicated all of his free time to magic. Lith was eager to even the field. He charged at Aelia, who was currently the easiest target while unleashing a barrage of spells to prevent her from escaping. Pelian had the same idea. He blinked behind Freya, having care of remaining outside of Fulgard's area of effect. His hands were brimming with mana, ready to unleash a spell that she couldn't avoid from such close range. Unfortunately for Pelian, he was well within Dimensional Ruler's area of effect. The golden sparkles of light which were filling the air distorted the space and made his dimensional door volatile. Instead of closing, the exit point exploded. The resulting burst of flames burned Pelian's back and threw him off balance. Freya turned around, performing several lunges with her rapier aimed at his vitals. Pelian took his greatsword out of his dimensional ring and a small explosion almost threw his weapon away. He managed to catch it by infusing himself with air fusion, but the desperate movement left him exposed. The rapier hit him several times, draining Pelian's armor of its last bits of energy before piercing his shoulder. Pelian grunted, using darkness fusion to cut off his pain receptors. Between his burned hand and his wounded shoulder, he wouldn't be able to keep his focus otherwise. A greatsword? Are you overcompensating for something? Freya said with a sneer. Pelian was enraged at the idea of having been hurt by a fake mage twice, yet he managed to keep his cool and unleashed the Tier 4 spell Wendigo's Wail. It was an unblockable attack that produced a cone of freezing air mixed with a shockwave. The former would weaken and slow down the enemy, while the latter would stun them long enough for Pelian to deal her a finishing blow. The sparks of golden light coalesced in front of him, forming a warp steps which swallowed the spell and released it right behind Freya's back before dissipating. It all happened so quickly that Pelian was still trying to understand how she could have deflected his spell when Freya resumed her attack. The potion she had taken made up for her lack of fusion magic while her swordsmanship outmatched the opponent's. She never attempted to block the much bigger and clumsier great sword if not with her conjured tower shield. Her rapier danced like a snake against Pelian's guard and every one of her hits created a deep wound. Pelian cursed his bad luck realizing that even when his attacks landed, they did little to no damage. Now that his armor's pseudo-core had exhausted its energy, the difference in defensive abilities was overwhelming. Light fusion alone wasn't enough to heal his wounds fast enough. Thanks to darkness fusion shutting down his pain receptors he didn't feel pain, but every new cut was making his stamina deplete faster. He faked a lunge and the moment Freya retreated, Pelian flew back to buy enough time to use invigoration. Freya lunged too, but despite the distance, she hit her target. The golden lights had coalesced again, forming a small warp steps right in front of Freya's weapon and another at Pelian's back. She kept stabbing the air in front of her and her blade started to appear out of nowhere from impossible angles, forcing Pelian to use all of his focus just to remain alive. "What kind of monster are you?" he said. Freya didn't reply. She moved forward, making more and more golden lights surround her opponent. Dimensional Ruler was a Tier 5 dimensional magic spell which used Freya's great mana perception and her talent for space manipulation to open countless small warp steps all around her. It allowed her to perceive anyone warping near her and to make space unstable at will. It was the reason every time Pelian employed a dimensional ability something had exploded in his face. Freya could also use it as a means of attack or defense, but only within a short range. Like all dimensional spell, it was also very mana expensive, but she knew that time wasn't on their side. They had to get the upper hand quickly, or they would be defeated. Lith and Aelia were fighting in close quarters and things weren't going well for her. She had come to the fight prepared. Too bad that according to her predictions it was supposed to be a long-range battle where her group would outnumber and outgun their opponents. After activating Third Eye, Aelia and her companions were supposed to become even stronger, whereas their enemies would be like fish in a barrel after suffering from a damage to their life force they weren't used to. Even the worst-case scenario she had prepared for didn't involve fighting one-on-one at close range. Lith was faster, stronger, and more devious than any opponent she had ever sparred with. If she tried to buy some time to cast a spell, he would exploit her lack of focus to aim straight for her vitals, whereas whenever she focused solely on dodging his attacks, Lith would cast a spell toward her escape route and disrupt her rhythm. We've been fighting for just a few seconds and I'm already covered in wounds. Where the fuck are the others? Aelia released all of the attack spells stored inside her rings. The gatekeeper was seconds away from chopping off her head and she knew it. The sudden barrage of spells forced Lith to step back and dodge, giving Aelia a full breath worth of energy from invigoration. Most of her wounds healed, yet the most important thing was that she had regained part of her stamina. Damn it, I was so close to finishing her off. The silver lining is that her rings should be out of energy now. I could use Origin Flames, but aside from giving away my identity, I would gain no advantage. Back at the church, her barrier withstood Protector's and mine combined attack. A simple blast of flames would just surprise her. She's physically weak, I need to exploit it, Lith thought while he blinked away. The moment Aelia saw the dimensional door opening, she spun on herself like a top to find its exit point and counterattack, yet she found nothing. She then watched above and finally below, where Lith had just appeared at dozens of meters of distance. I expected him to stick at close range, but maybe he too is running out of strength. Aelia was about to use invigoration again, to not waste a single moment of that unexpected break, when Lith released the Tier 5 spell, Stormnado. The air around him became thick and heavy. Strong gales spread upwards the noxious fumes generated by his hands. Stormnado was a mix of air and darkness magic that conjured a thunderstorm of poisonous gas. Lith had switched his position to make sure that even with its huge area of effect, only Aelia would get caught by the ascending. Chapter 582, Tactics and Strategy Part 4. Please, no, Aelia said even though she knew that the ranger couldn't hear her. She was a smart girl. Aelia could easily guess what was going to happen. The moment the spell hit her, Lith would be free to cut her down with his swords while she was too busy defending herself from the storm. A mage couldn't be hurt by their own spell, so the ranger could disregard Stormnado's effects and focus solely on attacking. Jaren too understood that her friend had a few seconds left to live. He had no idea how a fake mage could hold her ground against Pelion, but he knew that the moment one of them fell, the rest would soon follow. The Emperor Beast had no skill with his weapon, but each of his strikes had the weight of a mountain. The only time Jaren had blocked with his broadsword, not only did the blade almost break, but the impact also numbed his hands. Banyo, keep him busy. Aelia needs help, he yelled as he dived below to the rescue. Banyo released a strong cyan aura and went all out. Up until that moment, Protector's strikes had been shallow because he had to shift his attention from one awakened to the other, but now he could focus solely on her. There's a silver lining in being alone. Here goes nothing. She unleashed a Tier 5 spell, Shattering Star. The space around her was now filled by ice shards as big as a man, each one infused with several lightning bolts worth of electricity. Protector dodged the magical hail like it was moving in slow motion, but then Banyo snapped her fingers and the ice constructs exploded into a heavy rain of smaller crystals. The damage each one dealt was negligible, but they were almost impossible to dodge and sharp enough to cut through Protector's thick fur. They would also release a jolt of electricity so strong that they would cause a seizure even to someone using earth fusion. Protector cursed his naivety and conjured a small tornado around himself to escape from the jaws of death. Shattering Star ended up inflicting him only scratch wounds, but it had never been meant to win the battle, only to stall for time. Banyo smirked at her turtled-up opponent and cast more spells while using invigoration. She considered Emperor Beasts dangerous only because of their physical abilities. Due to their primitive brains, their magic lacked finesse. Or so Banyo thought until she noticed that the tornado didn't deflect the ice crystals, so much as capturing them. She could feel the Emperor Beast's mana flooding her spell and make it his own. The shards grew in size by the second and so did the electrical current they held. When Protector released half of them, they had become ice lances which moved as fast as bullets. Banyo had no defense that could stop that kind of firepower and was forced to blink away. The moment Protector spotted her exit point, he released the other half while he called the first volley back. Banyo was ready to blink again, but the ice lances hit her barriers like a truck, making her lose her focus. By the time the second volley arrived, all of her protections were exhausted. The first spear pierced through her lung, the second through her stomach, and the third through her shoulder. Each one opened a gaping hole into her flesh, so big that Protector could see through them, the events unfolding at Banyo's back. The number of holes in her body increased until it was turned into a burst of blood, skin, and guts. I'm sorry, but you left me no choice, Protector said as Banyo's remains were scattered to the wind. I was willing to spare you if you surrendered, yet you kept fighting despite everything was lost. I can't afford mercy when you willingly threaten the members of my pack. Then, he had the wind blow under his wings and turned into a blur. Aelia, blink behind me, Jaren said the moment he was sure that the Emperor Beast wasn't following him. Aelia did as instructed, but unfortunately, so did Lith. The two warps opened almost at the same time, making it impossible for Jaren to distinguish friend from foe. Me and my big mouth. Since he couldn't attack, Jaren weaved several barriers in front of himself, just to be safe. Lith had run out of Tier 5 spells, so he had to resort to the Tier 4 spell Death Call. 4 long arms made of shadow came out of his body, ignoring both of his enemy's defenses. From such a close distance, neither of them could use magic without the risk of harming their partner rather than their enemy. To make matters worse, they soon discovered that, even 2 against 1, they were physically no match for Lith. Both the ranger and his blade were infused with the power of the elements, doubling the effects of fusion magic. After exchanging a quick glance, Alia and Jaren blinked away at the same time, hoping that whoever Lith ended up chasing would buy the other enough time to turn the tables. Pelion wasn't faring any better. Dozens of deep cuts covered his body and the blood loss was draining his stamina by the second. Dimensional Ruler prevented him from using dimensional magic to escape, and all of his means of attack had been neutralized by Freya's combination of spells. Full Guard allowed her to move her conjured tower shield wherever it was needed, and the golden light surrounding them made her rapier appear from his every side, as if he was surrounded by several opponents. Trying to get at least a second of respite, he unleashed all of the spells he had at the ready and those stored inside of his magical rings. Freya did the same, but whereas she had several means to defend herself, Pelion only had earth fusion in his enhanced body. He infused the amulet at his neck with what mana he had left, generating a barrier made of pure energy that saved his life. Freya used her tower shield to block as many attacks as she could before it crumbled, and then she blinked behind her opponent while Pelion was blinded by the light generated by the spells exploding on his barrier. Pelion wasn't naive and was expecting something like that. His enhanced senses alerted him in time. He managed to turn around in the nick of time and block Freya's sword with the hook-shaped hilt of his own. He ripped it off from her hand and used his free arm to grab at her neck. He was now out of mana, making it necessary for him to finish her quickly. Unfortunately, while he so skillfully overpowered her arms, her leg found her way to his gonads. Freya kicked them hard and fast enough to send them keeping company to Pelion's tonsils. With his pain receptors functioning again, he doubled over in agony and Freya's knee welcomed his face as her elbows struck at the back of his head. Meanwhile, in the sky above Xantia, Zadros was considering the idea of going down and save the 3 awakened youths remaining. If those weaklings die, I will never learn their masters' identities. Dead men tell no tales and can't be blackmailed, he thought.